Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NeoSystems Professional Services webinar series. This month, we're featuring the 5 key benefits of Costpoint BI report bursting. I'm your host, Don Carnevale, Director of Corporate Marketing at NeoSystems. Next slide, please. So very briefly, I'd like to just talk about NeoSystems. We have 4 main lines of business where we support our clients. The first is our newest line of business, which is managed security. We provide CMMC compliance and supply chain readiness for our government contracting clients. We also have a hosting line of business where we have a FedRAMP ready FISMA moderate cloud that meets NIST and DFARS and ITAR certifications. We also provide outsourced managed services from accounting, human capital, and IT services. And our last line of business, which is really what we're focused on today, is a systems integration line of business, where we perform implementations, upgrades, business intelligence, extensibilities, and system reviews for a very purpose-built set of partners, including Deltek, Workday Adaptive Planning, Integrify, SAP Concur, and TIP Technologies. Next slide, please. Quick look at our agenda today. I'll introduce our speaker momentarily. He'll then speak about what really is report bursting, talk about some of the key benefits that clients are seeing, also provide some use cases as to how it's being used right now, and then also we'll provide a demonstration of the product towards the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. And then now I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Taufiq Habiby, Director of Business Intelligence at NeoSystems. Taufiq.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Good afternoon or good morning, everybody. My name is Taufiq Habiby, coming to you from the Eastern Shore of Maryland on what is shaping up to be a nice day. So today we're going to talk about report bursting and what it involves. And again, Don mentioned some of the benefits to that. I'm going to go ahead and talk through them right now before we actually go through some of the slides here. But basically, when you burst a report, you are running a report in the background and distributing its contents to the various recipients that need to receive that data. And the actual, by definition, bursting a report is a process of running that report once and then dividing the results for the recipients, and they get a subset of the data. And this is not very new to Cognos Analytics. It's been around actually for a while, but we thought it would be a nice way to actually reintroduce it and maybe get some folks thinking about how they could use it within their organization. And really what report bursting does is it lets you automate some delivery of reports. Everybody knows that we can schedule reports in Cognos and then distribute them to users. This just takes it a step further by dividing the information that each recipient gets, so they only get the data that they are interested in. So not everybody's going to receive the same data or the whole complete report. Obviously, there's convenience aspect to that, is that your users don't have to log into Cognos and run their reports. They will just deliver them when they are ready and when they're available. There's also security implications for this. Maybe you don't want other people to see some of the relevant information. This gives you a way to separate that and only show folks the data that they're supposed to see. And then the other piece of it is that maybe you don't have the need to have all of your users access Costpoint or Cognos enterprise reporting, and basically just want to distribute the information to them that is relevant without having to train or have them log into Cognos and actually run their own reports. And then the final benefit is from a report maintenance standpoint. If you design this report or a particular report that you want to use and enable it for bursting, then you're only maintaining one report, but customizing the output for the various users that you have. So from a report maintenance standpoint, you're not having to create a version of this report, one for Bob and one for Mary and one for Lisa. You just have one report, and then you separate the data when you run the report. Okay. So burst reports can be distributed by email or saved to a folder within the IBM Cognos Analytics portal. Obviously, typically most customers, most users would prefer to just receive the report via email, automatically delivered to their mailbox when appropriate. Couple of use cases for that. The one that really quickly comes to mind, obviously, is the PSR or the project status report, where you distribute after you maybe do your period close and you do your posting. You run a report burst of the PSR, and each project manager gets their own a copy of the report for the projects that they manage. That's usually a typical use case. The one that I'm going to do today has something to do with purchase orders. So when we actually jump into the demo, I'll show you the kind of report that I put together for our demonstration today. The typical procedure for bursting a report, you can build that report just like you build any other report in the report authoring tool. If you have an existing report that you have, you can actually modify it to enable bursting. And the couple of steps that you have to do there is you have to identify the burst recipient source and then specify a burst group. And what really that means is just you're marrying the data between the grouping in the report and who's going to receive that data. So for example, if I'm doing a PSR and I have a project manager, Bob, I just identify the project manager as the grouping or the burst group. So I'm going to group my report by project manager. And then the recipient source is going to be what field am I going to use to do that grouping. Once you define that in your report, then you can set some of the burst options in the report. It's just a matter of setting a property in the report. And again, we'll talk about that in more detail. And then when it's time to run the report, there's also a switch that you flip and it says enable bursting. The report will run and everybody will get their piece of that report. Okay. So define the source recipients for the report. Again, it depends on the complexity of that report. There could be multiple queries. However, you can only have one final query that can be used for the bursting. And this way you might have to rely on joins or unions to create that bursting query. But at the end of the day, you'll end up with one query that's going to do that matching between your grouping and the recipients. You can define the recipients of your burst report by either creating a calculated field inside of the report, and that's the one we're going to use today in our example. But you could also have a special burst table in your data source, or you could actually have it in a field in your source system as well. So in the case of our project managers for our PSR example, we can just use the project manager email in our employee table. But if we didn't have that, we can actually create a custom table that lets us burst our reports based on any particular grouping. Each recipient value or a grouping becomes the burst key for a report. So that, for example, if I'm doing this by project manager, then that recipient value is my burst key. That's who's going to receive that data. But I could also break my report by organization. I can break my report by project. It just depends on what your use case is or what the need is. Okay. Setting the report burst options in the report. You navigate to the report. Actually, it becomes a report property at the report level. And there's a flag, a property there on the property sheet that you click on to enable bursting options. And basically, it is nothing more than setting this option here, which tells Cognos to make the report available for bursting. Once you do that, we have to populate some of the information on that screen. And the screen is divided into two areas. Basically, on the left-hand side, what do I want to break my report or group my report by? On the right-hand side, what do I want to happen when that grouping occurs? So in this example, on our left-hand side, we're going to group our report by organization name. So we define the organization name as the grouping field. And then on the right-hand side, we're telling Cognos that whenever the group changes, who is going to receive that information. And the source of that is also happens to be the query. We have a data item in our query, and that's going to be the recipient's email in this instance. And we're going to let Cognos know that we are going to break this report by email address. So in other words, in our report here, Our organization name is going to be the grouping. And for each organization name, we're going to have an email recipient for that report. That's basically all we have to do from a report standpoint. You update that information, you save your report, and you are done on the report authoring side. When you're ready to run the report and actually distribute it, you can enable that bursting in the Cognos Analytics portal when you are running the report. You navigate to the report in the portal. You click on the More button on the right-hand side. Again, I'll show you this in our demo environment. And you select the option as a Run As option. And you have to select a background activity. So you can't run the report in the foreground interactively because Cognos has to do the work behind the scenes. So you would run it as a background activity. You get to pick the format if you want to run it as a PDF or an HTML or Excel. Any prompt values you want to enable, you can do that. And then you have to check the box that says burst the report. So the step that we took here earlier by making the report available to bursting right here, when Cognos looks at that report, it says that it has been enabled for bursting, and we'll see that option here to actually be able to burst the report. Once we set that flag, then we determine if we wanted to save the report to the system or have it sent by email. And that's all really what we have to do. And we can just run the report. So I'm going to quickly walk you through a simple report that I put together for us today. So I'm just going to show you this report here. This one is a report that lists my purchase orders that I issued by my buyer. So I just have a regular good old-fashioned Cognos report for each buyer. They get a page and it lists all the POs and the PO lines for which they were the buyer for. So if I page down, my first buyer here is Alan. My next buyer is Carl Wilson, and these are the POs that were issued for him. Here's Mary and all the POs that were issued. And here's Raju also with his POs. So I just have 4 buyers. And the idea here is that every time or every week or every month or every day, I can do this daily or nightly, whatever the occasion is, I just want to notify my buyers that these POs have been issued, and I just want to send them an email. So my goal here is to have this report email out the purchase orders that were issued for that buyer in a report, in a burstable report. So here's how I'm going to do that. So I'm going to edit my report. So switch to edit mode. And I'm going to navigate to my query in the query section right here. And as you can see, it's a simple report. It's just sourcing data from purchasing. And I need to identify the burst recipients. Now, I don't have their email addresses in the system. I need to create a custom data item that's going to mail the report or identify to Cognos each of my recipients. So like I said, I'm going to break my report or burst it by buyer name. So I'm just going to drag a query calculation. Okay. And I'm just going to call that email address. Okay. And now I want to build this custom case statement here that's going to break my report for the email recipients. Again, in the interest of time, I'm just going to copy and paste this case statement. And hopefully everybody can see it okay. So I'm just going to create a case statement based on buyer name. And all I'm saying here is when that the buyer name is Alan, I want you to send the report to Taufiq. When it's Carl Wilson, I want to send the report to Carl. I'm just using my email address. So I'm going to spam myself here in a second, just to show you how the reports would look like when they're received. Obviously, you would use their email addresses. And when it's Mary, you would have her email address. When it's Raju, you would have his email address. And then I'm going to catch, just in case we hire a new buyer and nobody tells me that we have a new buyer, I'm going to catch anything that falls through those 4 buyers that I already have in my system. I'm going to have those emails sent to me just in case. So just I'm aware that there are some POs issued against maybe a new buyer that I hadn't planned for. So this is considered typically a best practice with case statements, is you want to capture those exceptions that maybe you haven't captured in your when clauses. Okay, so I'm going to click OK here. And I just added my new data item for the email address. So this is going to be, if you will, my grouping. And these are going to be the email addresses that Cognos is going to use to email the reports out. Okay. That's the first piece of it. So now I just got to go to my report and enable bursting. So I'm going to go to the report link here. I'm going to open up the property sheet. And you can see here, the first property is burst options. So I'm going to click on that and click on the more button, and I get my burst options screen. And all I have to do here is click on the checkbox to make the report available for bursting. And now I just got to pick the left-hand side. If you can think of this as an equation, I'm going to pick the left-hand side of that equation and then do the right-hand side of that equation. So I'll pick the query that my report is using. That's where my grouping is going to be. The label that I want to use for this particular instance is the buyer name. And then I have to define the groups. And I'm also going to define the groups also as my buyer name. So I'm going to break my report. All the POs are going to be broken out by buyer name. And that's it for the left-hand side of the equation. On the right-hand side, I'm going to define also what action Cognos is going to take when the buyer name grouping changes. So I'm going to pick my data item, which would be the calculation we just created of the email addresses. And I'm just going to tell Cognos that these are formatted as email addresses. So when Alan's data comes in, Cognos is going to take Alan's email address and send him his report. When Mary's portion of the report comes through, Cognos is going to email the report to Mary, and so on and so forth. And that's basically all I have to do. So I'm going to save my report. And now I am done. And again, this report is still useful to me. I don't have to create it just specifically for bursting. I can actually come in here and run this report interactively. And it still works just like I showed you when we first started this exercise. It's still a useful report. I can still use it as is. I can run it to PDF or Excel or do whatever I need to do with it. Everything looks good. Okay. But let's say I wanted to actually deliver this report to my users. Now I have to go back and run it as a background task. So I click on the more button here, and I'll select the run as option. And like I said, in order to burst this report, you have to run it as a background task. And I can run it now, or I can run it later. Let's say, for example, I'm waiting on the end of business. I can run this report at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. tonight. You can also burst a report, the same technique I used, and put the report on a schedule. So you don't have to keep rerunning it every time. You can just have it run at the beginning of every month or at the end of every week or what have you on a schedule. And you could get the opportunity to enable bursting and have the report burst. But for our purposes today, I'm just going to run it now. And I'm going to select a PDF format instead of HTML. And you'll notice here, I have this bursting option on the report. I can come in here and turn that on. Oops. Okay. And you'll see here that now it says bursting is enabled. And I really don't have to do anything else. I'm just going to focus on delivery. So I'm going to save the report to the system, but I'm also going to send it via email. Okay. And I'm going to do some other things here on the email side. I am going to add a little header here, new POs issued. Okay. And then instead of including a link, I'm going to make the report an attachment and attach it to the report. Okay. And then I'm going to actually make sure that I want to email it as a PDF. I want to burst the report. I want to save it to the system and email it. And that's it. And now I'm ready to go. So I'm going to click on the run option. And I get a message up here says that my request to run this report in burst mode has succeeded. And let me open up my emails and let's see if we get some new emails come through. All righty. Give me a second here. It'll take it a minute to process. But in the meantime, actually, remember I asked to save the report to the system. So I can come in here and click on the view versions option. Okay. And you see here's my run that I ran at 11:50 a.m. And now you'll see that I have 4 separate reports. There's a version, remember we said we were going to label the report. So that's what the labeling does. So I have a PDF for Alan, I have a PDF for Carl, I have a PDF for Mary, and a PDF for Raju. And if I click on the PDF for Alan, it opens up the PDF and you'll see that this is a 1-page report. So I can't scroll or do anything. And it's only got Alan's data on it. Okay. So if I go back to the welcome screen and go back to view versions. And let's take a look at Raju's version. And you'll see this report only contains data for Raju. He has a 2-page report. So by creating one report, I'm able to enable the bursting, do just some minor tweaks to the report to tell Cognos that I want to break up or group my report by buyer. And then I associated each buyer with an email address and told Cognos to burst the report. Now my folks, Mary and Raju and Alan, don't have to log into Cognos. I also don't have to show Raju Alan's POs and vice versa. They get the data that is relevant to them delivered to their email box as a PDF attachment. And I'm still waiting on my emails. They will come through here. It will take a couple of seconds for it to come through. All right. And let's see, they should, I'll get spammed here in a second. It'll take them a minute, but they will be delivered via email. Not quite there yet. Okay. So while we wait for those emails, Don, do we have any questions? Anybody have any questions?
Yes, there is one question that's come in, Taufiq. The question is, how can I burst the report into my user folders?
Okay. That is a very good question, and I don't think I've ever heard that before. So that is a very good question. I think the only way to do that is by using a CAM ID to distribute rather than an email address. A CAM ID is a special serial number that Cognos creates for each user. That might be an option, is to point it that way. But that is a very good question. I haven't ever really had that request to do it. Most people that burst reports either send them off to email addresses, or they put them in a folder, email them to a folder for off Cognos processing, like to a SharePoint site or what have you. So I'm going to look into that, even if it's possible, and we can get back to you on that one. And I see another question. Is this functionality already available? Yes, it is not an upgrade. It's out of the box capability that comes with Cognos Analytics. So what I did here was nothing really special or extra. And actually, this capability has been around for a while. It actually was around with Cognos 10, also before Cognos 11. So they've had it for a while. But you know, again, maybe some folks didn't know about it or about the capability, but it is absolutely out of the box functionality. Okay, and looks like my emails came through, so I get a couple of them here. So here's one of the emails that came through. Hello, please see the new POs issued. And if I open up the attachment in the PDF, we'll see that it opened up in my other screen. Let me drag it over. There we go. So here's Carl's PDF. It's only containing his data as well. Okay. And we should have gotten 4 emails. So one for each user. This one is for Raju. And again, he only gets his data. So you can do this with any kind of report that you have in the system. Again, the key piece here is just determine how you want to break up that report. I do know another question I get, well, what if, for example, I have this report and I'm grouping it by org, and I need to send it to more than one person. So maybe you have an organization lead and maybe a co-director, or maybe you want to send these any purchase orders issued for Raju, maybe you want to send them to a couple of people. A couple of ways you can do that is that email address field that I created in the report. You can separate that with commas and put multiple addresses. You could also make use of, for example, distribution lists in your Outlook system or your email system. And instead of using an individual email's address, you can use that distribution list email address. And you could email the whole group. Cognos will just hand off that report to your email system, and all of those folks in that distribution list would receive that output. Okay. I think we have about 3 minutes left, I think. So I'm not sure if we have any more questions.
If you want to go back to the presentation, we can open it up to Q&A.
Absolutely.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions for Taufiq about what you've seen today, or if you have any other questions regarding report bursting, please go ahead and enter those into the Q&A area within the Zoom window. And we've got just a couple minutes left where we can address those. So we'll wait just a few moments to see if any questions come in.
And if anybody's interested in those couple of slides that I went over, I know we're trying to keep this short within the 30-minute window. But if anybody wants those slides, I'd be more than happy to send you a PDF of those slides if you're looking to kind of a reference for the step-by-step. And it looks like Alexander's asked that question. So yes, I can, if you entered your email address, which I think, Don, you have everybody's email address.
Yes.
We could email you those slides, no problem. Sure thing. All right. If you do think of something afterwards, also feel free, send out an email. Be more than happy to answer any specific questions if you're trying to take a look. Yep, Yolanda, got your message. We will be emailing the slides out, and Pamela as well.
One other question, though, we are recording this session and we'll make that available on demand on our website either late today or tomorrow. So you'll be able to access it there. And we will make available the slides from today as well.
Excellent.
Taufiq, could you go ahead and move ahead to the next slide, please? I did want to invite everyone here today to a special event happening next week. We're presenting a Costpoint Optimization Summit on April 22nd from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. This will feature 4 sessions where Costpoint users will talk about different ways that they're using Costpoint to build efficiencies and to grow their business. We've got speakers from organizations such as ICF International, Parsons Corporation, and we're really excited to have all in there to present. So again, you can go to our website, neosystemscorp.com, and find the events area on our website, and that's the path that you can follow to register for that event. There's no charge for the event, but we do need you to register so we can provide the correct information to you. So that's all I have. Taufiq, next slide, please.
Okay.
And again, there's Taufiq's name and email address, where you can certainly email him directly. I will be sending out the slides and a link to the recording to everyone who registered. So you can expect to see that within the next couple of days in your inbox. And if you have any questions, again, please contact us, Taufiq, directly or via our website, and we'll be happy to answer your questions.
All right. I got one last question. I saw a lot of requests for sending the slides. So I think everybody's interested in those, and we'll take care of that. Karen asked the question, if I have a report grouped by project, can I burst by project manager? Absolutely. That's another one of the use cases that we use. you can just pull the email address from Costpoint, and that becomes your bursting group. If you have different bursting groups, it's really up to you when you design your report. How do you want to do that grouping, and who do you want to burst to? So you have maximum flexibility. If you want to send a series of projects, for example, to a project manager, you can basically group on anything that you want to, because grouping is an intrinsic functionality within Cognos reports. So you can group by org, you can group by company, you can group by account, you can group by business unit, whatever it is. You just have to create that pairing between the left-hand side of that equation and the right-hand side of the equation, and then Cognos will take care of all the details. Hopefully that answers your question. And I think we're a minute over, so I just want to say thank you everybody for your time, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Yes, thanks everyone. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.